If you're wondering who the Las Vegas Raiders cut today, you're in the right place. I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and we're going to be breaking down the why and will the Raiders potentially bring back the players that they ended up releasing today to the practice squad. We'll discuss all of that, but at the end of the day, if you're looking for just like a Raiders cut tracker, we're breaking it down for you on this video. We're also going to be keeping you guys up to date on this YouTube channel. For 100% free videos, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. That way, anytime the Raiders make a cut leading up till that deadline, which is right around the corner, August 27th, tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time, the Raiders have to get down to 53 players on that roster. So one of the very first moves that the Silver and Black made today was moving on from Ron Stone Jr. This is going to be one of the players that the Raiders really focus on trying to get back to that practice squad. They gave him $170,000 of guaranteed money right when he first signed as a UDFA, and a player that at times showed that he's a learner, and I'll also say anytime you give a player number 76, maybe the writing's on the wall a little bit, but he's a hard-working kid, was willing to go in and put in some of the extra hours that maybe not everybody's willing to do. But Ron Stone Jr. was a player that impressed, and I do think it's going to be somebody that they try to bring back on the practice squad. TJ Franklin was another player that the Raiders decided to waive, and if you're like, Mitch, what's the difference between cut and waive? Technically, all the players that have happened today are getting waived, and a team can claim them then on Wednesday when the waiver period starts picking up again. But again, if none of the players end up getting claimed, that's where we're going to see Pierce Tom Telesco try to bring some of these players in. So that means right now, after moving on from TJ Franklin, after moving on from Ron Stone, right now, this is what your defensive end depth chart ends up looking like. And David Ago is going to make this team. He is the International Pathway Program player, which means he's just guaranteed to make it. Doesn't count against your 53. It's just he's on the squad. For Charles Snowden, Ellerson Smith, I'm going to be a big believer that, Crosby, Tyree, Malcolm, Janarius are all going to make it. I think it's really going to come down to Charles Snowden. We'll see what ends up happening here with Ellerson Smith, but if it was up to me, I would try to figure out a way to keep Snowden on this team just due to the fact that he's been such a good run defender compared to some of our other edge rushers there. Let's now go to the cornerback position. RayShad Williams, he's getting moved on from Texas Tech. Big outside corner, and you could tell early on in the draft process, again, I'm going all the way back here to April and May, the Raiders had an idea. They wanted big, long, lanky cornerbacks and big corners in general to be able to use in special teams, also be able to help kind of fill out the defense that they were looking to run. RayShad Williams unable to do it. He's not necessarily the player that I think they're going to try to bring back. The guy that I know for a fact the Raiders will try to bring back on their practice squad is Woo Governor. And undersized dude, but really showed that he can make it in the NFL. And he might be one of those guys that it takes a year, 2, maybe 3 years to really get it clicking, but you could tell Woo's going to be that dude. I'll admit, I think that there's going to be another team that probably puts in a claim for Woo, but if the Raiders see him and he's available there on that waiver period on Wednesday, I do think the Raiders are really going to try hard to bring him back on their practice squad. From a standpoint now of when you look at the entire depth chart, again, they just moved on from RayShad Williams. You got Woo Governor on top of that. Jaquan Shepard's going to be an intriguing player. The other very interesting player that you can't see pictured is Brandon Faison. If you want to check out a video that I put out earlier today on what the Raiders could potentially do in that situation, Brandon Faison's going to be a tough one. Sam Webb's going to be a tough one. But overall, I see the Raiders keeping 5, maybe 6 corners on this roster. Defensive tackle Noah Shannon. This one broke my heart a little bit, not because I expected him to make it, but Shannon's a really, really hard-working player. Max Crosby has credited his work ethic multiple times, and this is going to be another dude that this team is going to try to bring back. They want to be able to find somebody who can get it done in the run game, create a little bit more of that anchor, which there were times where Noah Shannon was able to flash that, and I think with just a little bit more coaching, he's around Rob Leonard a little bit more, going to be a solid move. Another player that they decided to move on from the defensive tackle spot, which was again, not too big of a surprise, was Marquan Mccall. Big guy, did shed actually quite a bit of weight this offseason, but it's all the other depth at defensive tackle. And if I'm somebody that believes that Tyree Wilson is more suited to be a defensive tackle, that kind of makes this even more of a challenge where John Jenkins, Adam Butler, Christian Wilkins, those guys are all locks to make it. Then it comes down to how many other players on top of that do they want to keep. Do they want to keep one out of Matthew Butler, Byron Young, Nesta Jade, Silvera? If they only want to keep one, to me, you got to keep Matthew Butler. Do they decide to keep the third rounder from last year from Bama and Byron Young? Do they decide to keep the seventh rounder last year, Nesta Jade? Do they decide to keep the fifth rounder from 2 years ago, Matthew Butler? This is no doubt going to be a defensive tackle battle that we're going to have to pay very, very close attention to, I think, the entire offseason. So out of the cuts that I've mentioned so far, and we still have, one more to get to, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Which cut was the most surprising today? This is going to be the pinned comment here on today's show, which means you're about to get hit with a YouTube ad break. I want you to scroll on down and give me your answer in terms of which cut you thought was the most surprising today. The one that I'm going to go with is, and here's the honest opinion, every single player that was cut today by the Raiders was an expected move. And I think what you're really seeing here, if I'm going to take anything based on this, it's the fact that the Raiders, the players that they're cutting now are guys that they really want to try to figure out a way to bring back onto that practice squad. You have that conversation. The name, though, that I'm just going to go with in terms of the guy that they want to bring back on the practice squad the most, it is either Woo Governor or it's Ron Stone Jr. And money talks. When you give a player $170,000 guaranteed as a UDFA, that tells you kind of everything that you need to know about what they think of him as that player. Also, Woo Governor. So, those two dudes, the way that they played in the preseason, the way that they looked in training camp, all the way, you got to go back to May. I think June is also important. Those would be the two players that I pay the closest attention to thus far on the waiver wire. Coming up, though, we'll go through the entire Raiders cut tracker again. There's still just one more player to get to. And when I first started making this show up with Shugs, I did it a little bit earlier in the day. I'm not going to lie to y'all. Had a few other things happen here at Chat Sports and kind of got put on the back burner a little bit. But from a cut tracker standpoint, try to say that 3 times fast. I wanted to be able to make this video just so y'all had a good idea of all the players that the Raiders moved on from, how many players were at this roster, and where we should be looking going into tomorrow. Before I get into that, though, Rocket Money, absolutely love them. Use this app literally at least once a week to just check out either my credit score, maybe I want to see how much money my fiance's been spending, but Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bill so that you can grow your savings. With Rocket Money, I have full control over my subscriptions and a clear view of my expenses. I can see all of my subscriptions in one place, and if I see something that I don't want, Rocket Money can help me cancel it with just a few taps. I love my fiance, Alex, and I love my dog, Chuck, but man, they are expensive, and I've been trying to save up for a house, a wedding, heck, even a vacation sounds good once in a while. And if you want to also get on that train, go to rocketmoney.com/LV Raiders. I'm going to say it again, rocketmoney.com/LV Raiders. Rocket Money has helped over 5 million users save a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. That's rocketmoney.com/LV Raiders. Nation, I'm going to say it one more time in case you weren't paying attention. rocketmoney.com/LV Raiders. Let's now go to the only player on the offensive side of the football that was moved on from today, Terrell Bynum. And Bynum was signed very, very late in this process here. He was brought in, had a little bit of experience before with Tom Telesco. But this wide receiver room, I'm not kidding you, I feel bad for the Raiders and some of the decisions that they're going to have to make, especially with this receiver room, because, either somebody in the regard of Tulu Griffin, Jalen Guyton, Christian Wilkerson, Ramel Keaton. I can make an argument of why Tyreek McAllister deserves to make this roster. I can make an argument of why Christian Wilkerson deserves to make this roster. I can make an argument of why Ramel Keaton, why Jalen Guyton. There's a lot of different players that I can make an argument for, and it's not going to be an easy one. I want the Raiders to keep 5 to 6 receivers. And again, depending on how healthy Brock Bowers is, depending on how they're going to use some of their other tight ends, wide receiver is going to be one fickle mistress, man, getting down to that 53-man roster cut down day. So some other big position question marks here that I want to talk about is corner. And I think the first thing the Raiders got to figure out is, what are we going to do with Brandon Facyson? If you're going to keep Brandon Facyson, then you got to have the idea that you're probably going to put him on the short-term IR. which means you're going to have to go out and then add somebody else. If it was up to me, I would cut Faison, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in depth tomorrow. You can save $2.6 million, but you didn't see a lot out of MJ Devonshire. You didn't see anything out of Faison. There's just a lot of question marks at the cornerback position. At linebacker, if anything, this was a position that I didn't know exactly what we were going to get into, and because so many other players were able to step up, where Amari Gaynor, we got to figure out a way that this guy makes this squad. He showed you enough that he deserves it. But the Raiders drafted Tommy Eichenberg. That's a player you could be looking at and saying, hey, maybe that's a guy I got to put on IR. Amari Burney's been battling some injuries. That's a player you're like, that's a guy that I anticipated to keep him. They didn't play Luke Masterson in that last preseason game, but we got to figure out a way to keep Amari Gaynor on this team. Let's go to defensive tackle, and I kind of mentioned this one already. The fact that they've already moved on from Marquan Mccall, the fact that they've already moved on from Noah Shannon helps out me figure out where the top players are. And this is where I kind of figured that the top players were all along. But to me, it's a matter of, are you going to keep two more or are you going to keep one more? And I think if they keep two, it tells me that they're going to keep Tyree Wilson at defensive end. If they keep only one defensive tackle, then that tells me they're going to move Tyree on in the inside a little bit more. And then again, that final spot is wide receiver. It's going to be a tough one. Tyreek McAllister is a dynamic player, was one of the best special teamers in the UFL just a season ago. Showed you with 2 touchdowns in that final preseason game what he's able to do. Though, if you're looking for more of a receiver that can take over a game, Randall Keaton might be the better receiver. He's a little bit more inconsistent where he has some plays, but then he makes the flash play. The Raiders got some real depth there at wide receiver. I almost wish we had one more preseason game. Actually, no, I don't. I'm ready for the regular season. For any more updates here around the Las Vegas Raiders, you can always hit me up on IG and on Twitter. I'm at Mitchell Renz 365, and if any other cuts happen throughout the course of tonight, I will do my best to at least be able to keep you guys up to date on social media. I've also put out a bunch of shorts and stuff this morning, which this is the time of the year to absolutely be sub so you don't miss some of the minor notes and news that happened every day. I will do my best tonight, tomorrow morning, and Chugs and I are going to be live tomorrow, counting it down, getting ready for the Raiders get down to 53 players, which they have to do by 4 p.m. Eastern time.